Hello. Hello, fancy seeing you here. This is my Cross RC HC6. I realised I've done a few videos on this. If you've seen them, they're an unboxing and some build videos, but then I haven't really done anything about it since, just driving videos. And the same with my other trucks, so I thought I might go through some of them, just about what they're like to live with and what I've had to do to them to get them working and the sort of problems I've encountered. So yeah, I've had this about nearly a year, about 10 months maybe, and it's been really good. Short version, the major issues have been around the gearbox, in particular the tyres, and partly the suspension a little bit. It's pretty tough. It's tougher than I thought, to be honest. It gets quite a hard life here in Wales. There's plenty of rocks and deep water. This is a snorkel in the last video. But it deals well with all of it. It's as you can see, I mean, there's very little overhang on the front. There's almost none on the back, so it'll climb up quite a lot of stuff. Ground clearance is pretty good. One thing I was worried about are these side steps and the tanks. The side steps, because you have to glue this part of the step onto the whatever that is, I don't know. And I thought that was vulnerable, and they're only screwed in with 2 screws. And then these are on metal brackets, but they're very, very thin, flimsy brackets, or feel it. Once you've got those 2 screwed together on the tank, that's actually really solid. You can pick the truck up by that, and I avoid picking it up by this, but it's taken some hard hits from rocks, you know, and it drops off a rock from the front wheel and goes bang on there. Never had a problem, nothing's come off. It's got some decent scrapes but it's pretty good. It's rugged, so that's a good thing. The metal drive shafts, they're standing up. There's a lot of slop in the shafts though. I think quite a lot of transmission slop is these. Replacing these is on my list. It's not that high though. So the first thing I did change on it were the tyres. The stock tyres look fantastic, but they're very hard. The sidewalls are hard. You can see this has got a little bit of squish, particularly at the front, as most of the weight's up there. But then the compound is quite hard, so they're not the stickiest. They're not bad, particularly when you've got 6 wheels driving, you know, it does pretty well, but it also adds to the bounciness. It's all leaf springs, but there are dampers of sorts in the front. But they're not really dampers. They're not dampers in the normal oil damper sense, where they're damped by oil. Yeah, they're kind of air, which is a very odd setup. It kind of works. It's weird. Maybe I'll get into that. So yeah, so the stiff sidewalls really add to the general bobbly bounciness of the truck. These are much better. These are GMade 1901 tyres, I think. But these wheels, as like I think a lot of people with cross trucks will tell you, are horrendous to build. They just don't like tyres. you do them up, and that last little bit, and then the bead will just go and just squidge out the sides. Really frustrating. And a lot of people just give up on them, to be honest. You just can't mount a tyre. I know a couple of people who've struggled completely. So to get these on, I did have to buy in the end the Proline narrow centres, the rings for inside the B-locks, because they just wouldn't mount otherwise. So, and they actually work perfectly. I think I say Proline, they're RC 4-wheel drive, but they're made for Proline tyres, so that you can fit Proline tyres to RC 4-wheel drive wheels. But they work perfectly for this, or they did for me. So with these G-Mades on, they're stickier, they're a lot squishier, they've got a lot more squidge and bounce, and they'll conform a little bit, and the grip is improved, and the ride is improved, because it's a little bit more damping in the tyres themselves. That's worth doing. So the main issues I've been having, I take the cap off, it seems I can't. Here we go. I've already got the lights unplugged. This light controller is not waterproof. That usually lives in this little housing, which works quite well. And I just have it stacked up here quite high, just below the bonnet. Main problems I've had, and they have got quite annoying at times, is with this gearbox, specifically with the shifting and partly with the gearing. The first thing I changed on this in the gearbox was the pinion, because it's just too fast. It doesn't need to be that fast. You've got 2 gears, so you can use that second gear for extra speed. It doesn't really need to be much more than a little bit more than walking speed maybe, and that's enough wheel speed for this. So you can easily gear it down, but you don't get any information on the pitch of the pinion or the gears in here, or what size is in it, or you don't really get any information at all. Oh, by the way, when I measured it, I could be wrong, but I've got a mod 0.6, I think it's a 16 tooth pinion in there now, because as far as I can tell they are mod 0.6, and that works pretty well, but it seems quite loud. But I think it's okay. There's no obvious wear or anything like that, but it's quite a loud truck. It's just quite a loud gearbox. Everything's metal in there, and it kind of reverberates a bit as well. And the gearbox itself is quite just a big cube, like an amplifier. It's a lot quieter if you drive it under the water. What also complicates matters is this gearbox doesn't match the instruction book, which I found out when I took it apart and then wanted to know how it went back together. So that was a bit of an adventure, complicated by the fact that because it's 2-speed and it's got this shift, I'm gonna have to get the camera down, aren't I? You can't see anything. Because it's 2-speed and you've got this shift arm in here, that's the shift servo, and there's the arm in there. That arm's sprung, so when you take the back off the gearbox, if you can see that, the bolts there, that whole back wall just comes off. When you pull that off, that tends to fire the everything, the gear. There's quite a few gears on this one bar. Just fire it out, and because it's also trapped beneath other gears, because it's also the gears themselves you can work out quite easily. And then you won't know exactly where they go because they don't quite match the manual, which isn't very helpful. A bigger problem than where the gears themselves actually go is where the shims go, and there are some brass spacers, little thin spacers, and if you pop those off it can be a bit confusing. I spent quite a while just putting them back in, testing it, bolting it back together, seeing if that span freely. It took me a while to take the slot back out. As you can see from this, it's not that easy to get the gearbox out, but you can do it. There's another bolt behind there, one bolt, both mounts at the bottom, and then one mount on the top, and then the whole gearbox will just drop out at the bottom, as long as you've slightly loosened the transfer case under there, so this little dog bone can drop out. It's not too bad. So all that whiffle aside, obviously one problem I haven't had is cleaning it, because I haven't done that very much. I consider it patina. It's the shifting. The shifting's a nightmare. I thought recently I might have to try a stronger servo, but I hope that's not the problem. I hope I've solved it. I keep thinking I have solved it, and I haven't. But I've readjusted the endpoints on this, and I think maybe the last time I took this transmission out, when it went back in, it was in a slightly different position perhaps. This bloody shifter, which you're all fascinated by, I know, but it's very resistant. So I've done several things. I've cleaned out the gearbox quite a few times. I've lightly greased it but not heavily greased it, because I don't want to stick the components that shift backwards and forwards together. I've clearanced up in there. I've very gently sanded with like 1000 grit inside the hole that the bar exits from. and I've reset the endpoints, and I'm hoping, having reset the endpoints slightly more aggressively than I did, so it really gives it a good shove. Oh, and I've also, you can adjust this bolt to tension the springs, so I've wound that down. I think that's down as far as it will go. Just to try and shove this thing into gear, because it did used to work. It was fine for quite a while. The gearbox, it's kind of a sloppy gearbox, it's a noisy gearbox. The manual doesn't match. You can figure it all out, but it's a bit of a faff. Suspension is what I really wanted to bring you all here today to talk about. It's got some, not a lot, like pull downhills. You'll like it, not a lot. Here are these weird dampers. There's a seal in the top, there's a seal on the piston itself, but there's no seal in the bottom. So you can't trap oil in there, and any oil, if you fill it with oil, you'll just hydrolock it. It can't move. There are no holes in the piston for the oil to flow through, and there's no seal in the bottom to keep the oil in anyway. So what you actually do is create an air chamber in here. Recently I put the spring back in, providing extra support for the truck. But I found you basically have to compress, before you put the cap on completely, just compress the whole thing against the spring and then tighten the cap. And then you'll end up with a lower pressure, because it doesn't want to come back down because of the low pressure. It sort of works. It's weird. I don't know why they did it. I've also put back, as you can see, this black. No, you can't. Now you can see this black leaf. I didn't originally put in because I thought the front was too high. Over the time I've had the truck, it's slowly sagged because most of the weight is up at the front, and it's been slowly sagging down on its suspension, and possibly this leaf's breaking in quite nicely. One thing I don't really like is this. See these two bolts here? When you tighten those up, that forces the centre of the leaf flat, which flattens the leaf itself. Really, they need to be on a sort of cupped dish. Look how clean this is, it's lovely. Look at that patina. Thanks. Really, that should be dished so it doesn't squash the leaf too much. Meanwhile, at the back, it's the other way around. It's too stiff. It's very bouncy. There's really no sag normally. What I've done lately is take one leaf out. I haven't actually driven it since. I need to test it, but you can see there is actually a quantum of droop, as James Bond would say. Look at that, tiny bit. And I'm hoping it's just got a bit less spring force to bounce around. It might be a little bit smoother still. That though has been about it for problems. It's not as heavy as I thought. I've been thinking it was £16 for some reason. I think I weighed the box, but it's actually 11 with no battery in. And then it's just been paint and weathering, and I have recently done another round of weathering on it. I'm not going to do anything as cheesy as just cutting to like the body being on. Oh, go on then, why not? See, for the first time, I've tried, I hope you can see, I've tried the misty window trick. The window kind of fell out anyway. I was maybe driving it through slightly deep water, and it blew the windscreen in because it wasn't quite glued as well as I should have got it glued. So it seemed a good time to just mark it up, take it right out, and spray it up. I was very careful not to put too much on, but I think I've maybe not put quite enough. Oh well, it's my first go. I did another sort of round of weathering as well, and I've even used a particular new technique that I call algae, or pond scum. You could call it pond scum, the pond scum technique, which is to drive it through a pond full of scum, which then sticks like scum to your truck. So there's quite a lot of that in there, and that's going under the heading of patina as well. Generally though, I've weathered it a bit more. I used the Magic AK paints that were recommended by some friends, and they are pretty magic. I hope I haven't gone overboard. I've sort of dirtied it up a bit, tried to make it look a bit more used. I also darkened this crate, the battery. I think hopefully it looks better. It looked a bit like chocolate before. This is quite a big crate, by the way, and I sort of don't like the fact that it's neatly right in the middle. I feel like it should be somewhere else. You could easily get like a 5,000 milliamp hour battery in there. It's pretty big, but I never use that much. I use a little 2.2. So I have thought of getting the one from the CA30, another one, the King Kong CA30, which is a wooden crate, and it's smaller. It's considerably smaller. So I might get one of those in future and tuck that in, maybe put it in sideways. So I don't know. What do you think? It's fascinating, really, isn't it? Crates. Let's talk about crates. So that's pretty much everything. Bar the shifting problem, it's been pretty hassle-free. So what have I got left to do on it? Always forgot to put the little, I think they're reflectors, doesn't seem very military, in these little tiny circles. I don't know if you can see those. I want to repaint the light covers, which I did in a slightly different brown, but they just look a bit naff. I think that's pretty much it. I've never worked out what to put in the back. I want some sort of load in the back, but I've just never worked out what. I should probably just buy some scale tat. I always like it, and it's so expensive, and I don't buy it. So yeah, that's it. That's my Cross RC HC6. That's what it's like to live with. I think it's not perfect, but it's pretty rugged. It's had quite a hard life. It's taken on some pretty hard tracks, deep water, rocks, rain, mud, the whole lot. Obviously I lovingly clean it each and every time, and it's done well. I would recommend it. They're a fun truck. Stop, go away. God, leave me alone. Jesus. Stop. Just